Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo, santificado sea tu nombre.
Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, que ton nom soit sanctifié.
Vater unser im Himmel, geheiligt werde dein Name, dein Reich komme, dein
Tatu wetu juu, jina lako litumbe. Fikisha ubumfumbo bukutudi.
Onze Vader, die in de hemelen zijt, uw naam worden geheiligd. Uw koning.
Monya wang lido, koto kwana bregoi, ete tunolo biogoi, ete.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
We're right in the middle of what we started a few weeks back called the world's greatest prayer. And our hope is that we can understand what we call the Lord's Prayer, or probably more appropriately called the disciples' prayer or the students' prayer, because it is a prayer that the disciples asked Jesus to teach. They saw something in him and in his life that they didn't have, and they associated it with his prayer life. So they said, Jesus, teach us how to pray, and this is what he taught them 2,000 plus years ago, and for centuries. Followers of Jesus have prayed this prayer. And I love that idea that when we pray this prayer, it connects us not just with the people across Carl Junction that are praying it, or Joplin, but across the globe and all of time. And so our hope is that this prayer becomes something more than just a rote sort of thing that we do, that it becomes more meaningful to you. My hope is that there's a couple things that will happen as we go deeper into this. One is that you will become a better prayer. I guess that's the right way to say it. You will be able to pray better in your life. Maybe there's times in your life where you're like, I don't know what to say, but I should pray. That's the perfect time to use this prayer. The other reason we're doing it is because we believe this prayer shows us a lot about the character and the nature of God and what God demands from us as well. And so my hope is this, that you've been in this series. If you haven't, go to our website, check out a few more, and come for the next couple weeks, because I believe if you are honest with this prayer, you will pray differently, and you will see God differently. Just real quick, a place to take some notes. As always, every week, I tell you this, to write some things down, maybe to remember or to share with somebody later on, and then use the study guide on the back side of that. It's on the inside to get deeper into God's Word than we can in the 20 to 30 minutes that we've got here. And I want to issue a challenge to you this week. For centuries, people have prayed the Lord's Prayer, and they have taken a practice of doing it 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening, somewhere in that time frame. And so there's the challenge for you. Maybe that's the next step in your faith, is to pray this prayer 3 times a day. And I got to be honest with you, if you do that, sometimes it might just feel like you're going through the motions, but I promise you, at some point, God is going to show up in that prayer. So please, take that challenge and let's do that. So before I get into the teaching, real quick, one more time, I want us to do this together. And at the first service, I let everybody sit down and do it, and it kind of fell flat. And so I want all you guys, if you're able, to stand up with me. I think I'll have the words up here behind me. And remember, when you're in church, don't start a line until somebody else around you has started it. That way you're not talking on your own, right? And be monotone, But let's pray this prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. As you sit down, tell the person next to you, good job, you prayed really well. Come on. There you go. Now, here's the thing. Today, we're going to focus on the part of the scripture that says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And now, in your Bible, the word trespasses may be translated in a different word. Your Bible may say the word debts, or it might say the word sins. And whether it's debts, trespasses, sins, the meaning is all the same. This is all about forgiveness. And forgiving people is a big deal if you're a follower of Jesus. In fact, forgiving people is not an option. Jesus just flat out tells you, if you're going to follow me, you're going to have to forgive people. So that's why we want to get into this. But today, as we do, I want to kind of look at it from the viewpoint of debt. So forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Maybe you've read it that way. Now, how many of you have incurred debt at some point in your life? It's okay to raise your hand. Most of us have in America. Debt is a normal thing in our culture. In fact, we are told once a year at least to go get your credit score checked. Why? Because the better your credit score, the more debt is accessible to you at better rates so that you can do different things. But we understand debt. Maybe it's a mortgage or a car payment or student loan or a medical debt or credit cards. How many of you who've already raised your hands that says that you've had some debt or have it would really like for somebody else to pick that debt up for you? Yeah. Maybe you didn't have to pay for it yourself. Because here's the simple rule of debt. Whenever you take out debt, the rule is this: you owe, and because of you owe, you pay, right? It's that simple. And you can test this theory if you want. Maybe you don't think that I'm being truthful about you owe and you pay, and say you owe the bank something on your mortgage, or wait, better yet, say you owe the IRS. Just call the IRS and tell them, hey, you know what, this debt that I owe you, I know that it's a lot, but it's really cramping my style, right? I'm not able to take my wife out like I wanted to, and I can't get the new car, and it's really putting bad juju on my relationships, and it's depressing me out. Will you please just get rid of that? And the person on the phone, what are they going to do? If they're Christian, they're going to say, oh, bless your heart, and then they're going to hang up on you. Why? Because when it comes to debt, you owe and you pay. Now, in the underworld, as we call it, there's a practice of lending money with, you have to pay back a lot of interest. And we use a term to describe those sorts of people, and it's an aquatic term. Anybody know which term I'm talking about? It's a predator. It's a shark. We never talk about somebody like that as, well, it's the lone guppy, right? It's the lone bunny. It's the lone puppy. It's all sweet. No. We talk about owing as something brutal. The rule is this. I hope I get my point across. You owe and you pay. Now, just so you understand the ancient world a little bit, the time when Jesus was talking about this, debt was very different. Back then, debt, if you incurred it and you failed to pay it, there was no bankruptcy. There was nothing like that. If you couldn't pay it off, you were thrown in jail until your family could pay off of your debts. And in fact, in the ancient world, when somebody was in jail for an extended period of time, most of the time that was because they were in debt. It wasn't for hardened criminals, because hardened criminals back then, once you were guilty, you were killed. And they made room for debtors' prisons. And so if your family couldn't work to pay off the debts, then they would be sold into slavery. Everything you own would be sold off. And so when Jesus is saying, forgive us our debts, he is saying something that is a life or death matter. Forgive us our debts. What we're saying is, God, forgive us for the ways that we have sinned against you, because we have all sinned against God, and we have a mountain of moral debt that we cannot pay off. But listen, you are not just the perpetrator of sin. And I think I can say that safely. But you are also the recipient of sin. You are a victim of sin of somebody else. You've been sinned against. You have some people that owe you something, some debtors. Somebody that you thought you could trust betrayed you and they hurt you. They were jealous of you and they said bad things about you. They twisted your words. Somebody in business stabbed you in the back to get ahead, and they owe you. Somebody broke your heart and didn't even think about your feelings. Somebody in your own family wounded you. A parent belittled you or neglected you or abused you. A spouse left you and betrayed you. A friend attacked you. Maybe it's somebody even in the church. You know, we hurt each other. It happens. We've been victims of sin. And we all have debtors. And this brings us to a spiritual crossroads and a tension when it comes to following Jesus, because what are you going to do with the people that have sinned against you? What are you going to do with those people who are your debtors? That's forgiveness. That's what we're talking about. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about forgiveness. And if you've been in the church for a long time, you know this stuff. I'm not going to insult you. I know you're intelligent. You know that we're supposed to. You know that there's spiritual benefits to forgiveness. You know that there's actual health benefits to forgiveness. There's actually been studies shown that people that can forgive, their anxiety and their depression and their overall hatred of people just goes down. It makes you a nicer person. You know this. But here's the thing, is I think at times we don't want to know it. And here's what I mean. Sometimes you feel like somebody's hurt you bad enough that what's right is to make them pay and pay to even the score. Forgiveness, it can look foolish. It can look like you're losing. It can look like you're just letting somebody off the hook, like you're not holding them accountable at work, at church, in your house, whatever it is. We can kind of get to the point where we think unforgiveness, not forgiving people, is actually the right way because it feels right. But what I want everybody here to know, in this room or online, I want you to know that Jesus is very clear about what we do with forgiveness. And I want to look at it today through the single phrase, and I want to look at a single word in this phrase that says this: forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And I think this might be one of the most sobering little two-letter words in the Bible. As. We should, by the way, be terrified of this word. This word should scare the bejesus out of you, or maybe into you, whichever one. As. Because what Jesus is saying here is there's a correlation between the way we treat other people that owe us and how the God of the universe treats us. And so I want to be very clear. I want us to be understanding of what Jesus means in this. Jesus told story after story about forgiveness. And one in particular, he told really kind of encapsulating this word as. And the context of the story begins with the Apostle Peter asking Jesus some question. And Peter is struggling to forgive somebody, a brother or a sister in the faith that has wounded him. And he wants to know about forgiveness. And so he asks Jesus, how often does he have to forgive somebody? And Jesus tells this story in the Gospel of Matthew. And he says this, that the kingdom of heaven, this is the way Jesus described heaven and God's kingdom, even here on earth. He says it's like a king who wanted to settle his accounts with his servants. And as he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. But since he wasn't able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and his children all had to be sold to repay the debt. There's that rule again. You owe, and then what? You pay. There's the rule. And we need to get our brains around this story, because this was just normal back then. You owed a debt, you couldn't pay it off, you were sold. And so Jesus is telling us this man owes him some talents. And I want to kind of give you an understanding of these talents here. He says it's, 10,000 talents. So in that time period, in Judea and Samaria, basically the Holy Land area, the taxes that were collected that would be sent to the Roman government would have been about 600 talents a year. So how many is 10,000? It's like a bajillion. I don't know if that's the right word. But it is. It's like national debt worth that this guy is gonna have to be able to pay back. And when you hear that story, the first thing when you understand the amount, you gotta probably ask a couple questions. One is, how in the world did this person actually get so much money from the king? And I think the main answer is this. You gotta recognize that the king is exceedingly generous, so much so that he would give you so much that you can never pay it back. But then at the same time, the question is, what kind of slave would actually take that much money, right? Take it and squander it, knowing that he could never pay it back, and assume that there wouldn't be a day of reckoning? What kind of servant would do that? In the church world, we have this polite phrase that I mentioned earlier. It's a bless your heart guy. You ever see the movie Dumb and Dumber? That's the guy. He can never repay it back. So right here is this picture of what's happening in the scene between God and the servant, or us. The king in this story is generous beyond measure, but at the same time what we see is the king of settled accounts, making sure that things are made right. He is committed to justice. This king doesn't just let things slide. So everything comes out into the light in this. And there's no way for him to pay off the debt. The king says, sell him, sell his wife, sell his children, sell everything he has. End of sentence, because that's justice, right? Next case. You owe, you pay. But this guy is like all of us. He's desperate. And when you're desperate, you start trying to bargain everything you can, throwing up a Hail Mary, if you will. And it says this, that the servant fell on his knees before the king. And this is what he says. Listen, he says, be patient with me, and I promise I will pay back everything. And if you're listening to this story for the first time, back when Jesus was telling it, you're like, right? This guy, there's no way this guy's ever going to repay this. It's too big. He is trying to scam the king. And then the story takes a twist in verse 27. Jesus says that the king took compassion on this foolish man. He looks at him. He's frightened. He's selfish. He's desperate. And the king is moved with pity. And the king sets his servant free, but not only sets him free, cancels his debt. Now you got to think about this for a second. This is a mountain of debt, bajillions in debt. This is a huge sum of money, and what happens when you cancel? Does the money just disappear? No. Somebody's got to make do. Somebody has to pay. Somebody has to take the loss. And so in this story, who pays? The king pays. The king says, I will take this unpayable debt. I'll take the hit. I'll suffer the loss. I'll take the whole price so that you can be free. Essentially what he says is, yes, you owe, but I'll pay. You owe, I'll pay. You know what we call that? We call that the economy of grace. So the king says, yes, you owe me everything that you said you would pay, and yet it's gone. You owe, and I'll pay. He's not going to send him into slavery. He leaves that place, and I bet when he gets home, he is the most excited that he has ever been, because he looks at his wife, and he knows that his wife isn't going to go to prison or slavery. He looks at his children and know that now they have a future, and all of his property would be there. There's no more debt. That is grace. Now, here's the thing, is we got to stop for a second and understand that this story is really our story. It's the human condition. This is your story, and it's mine. Jesus said there's a king, there's a God who is lavishly generous and painstakingly just. And as humans, we have accumulated a mountain of unpayable moral debt that we could never pay back. Any time that you have been less than honest, any time you've padded your expense account or fudged on your taxes, every time you have withheld your love from a child, every time that you've made that cutting remark or you gossiped about somebody, every time that you haven't spoken in love, every time God has given you a gift, every time you gossiped, like I said, every time you were selfish, those racist jokes, those sexually impure deeds, every judgmental attitude. This is the human condition. Every one of us, every one of you. Listen, I'm a pastor, and I've devoted my life to spiritual growth, but when I started to think of a list, it took me 10 seconds to come up with this list. You know why? Because my wife does this every single week. Oh, come on. She's not here. I can say that. No, it's not her. It's me. It's all me. Every human being, we're in the same boat, every one of us. But one day, this generous king came to a foolish me said, Ben, you owe, but I'll pay. And one day that king came to you, the foolish you, and said, you owe, but I will pay. The king says, come and live in my economy of grace. And it cost him his son to do it. It cost him the best that he had, and he did it without hesitation. That is the economy of grace. Well, here's the thing, is that the first part of this story? And I'd love it if the story ended there, make us feel good. But there's a second part that's going to disturb us a little bit more. Because you see, the servant that was extended all of that grace after that encounter with the king, he went out immediately. And here's what happens, is he found a guy who owed him 100 denarii, which is like pocket change, especially compared to like a quadrillion amount of dollars that he owed. And he grabs his fellow servant and he says, pay up. Pay what you owe me. And check this out. That fellow servant, the one that owes the guy money, this is what he says. He said his fellow servant fell to his knees and he begged him. Does this sound familiar? Be patient with me. I'll pay you back. He repeated the very words the first guy said to the king. I'll pay you back. The man's going to show grace here, and you're thinking, yes, he's going to do it because he's been so excited, but no. There's no compassion in the guy that's just been let off. There's no pity. There's none. It says that he grabbed him. He began to choke him, grabbed him by the throat. He wants to physically hurt his debtor, the guy that owes him. He doesn't want to even give the man time to maybe make arrangements to pay him back. No. He wants to throw him in prison where there's no hope. This graceless servant shreds every bit of grace in spirit and in action that the king offered to him. I think from the way Jesus told this story that this guy was offered grace, but he never really got it. And here's what I mean. I think there are times when we really just want to be left off the hook. You know what I mean? See, to accept God's grace, to be forgiven, means you actually have to do some work and build a relationship to do that. But instead, what we really want to do is to be let off the hook. We don't want to feel bad anymore. We want to feel like we're going to heaven. But we don't want to be in grace. I think that's what this guy wanted. I think he just wanted to feel good and get off the hook, and he was saved by the king's grace, but he had no intention of extending that grace to anybody else. Now listen, I don't know about your debts. I don't have access to your inner mind and your inner world and your secret hurts, your private thoughts. I don't. But I know myself. And I know my failures as a dad, and I know my shortcomings as a husband and as a pastor, and I know the way that sin keeps me from hearing and following God the way that I should, and I know that I am the biggest debtor that I have ever seen. And you are probably the biggest debtor that you've seen, that you know. And in light of that, who am I? Somebody who has been given grace, who am I to not extend that same grace who owes just as much or maybe less than I do? It's unacceptable. Now, the last part of this story, it gets ugly. Let's tell you, this is not one of those that makes you feel good. Because the king finds out what this graceless servant has done, and he's brought him in one more time, but there's a different feel in the room. There's no pleading. There's no bargains to be made. There's no Hail Marys. This time the king says to the servant, you didn't get it. You didn't get it at all. You thought the grace that I gave you was meant that you and I were good. Well, guess what? You and I, we're not good. You thought you could take from me and not give to somebody else. You thought because you were in with me, you could still be the same old rotten, unforgiving person that you've always been. Well, guess what? You are mistaken. You were offered the economy of grace, and you chose the economy of vengeance. So have it your way. That's what happens. Jesus ends the story this way. In his anger, his master turned him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive one another from your heart. Right there. One of the scariest phrases in all the Bible. I don't know how Jesus could make it any clearer. God, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And I bet you've got some debtors. A mother, or father, or brother, or sister, a husband, wife, or kids, or maybe it's somebody in this room or at this church. Will you choose the economy of grace or vengeance? Think carefully, but it's your choice to make. Now how's that for good news? That's the vision we get of what Jesus demands of us when it comes to forgiveness. But I want you to get a glimpse also of what some things forgiveness is not. Because forgiveness is not ignoring or excusing somebody's sin. This is not about just saying you're going to forget everything they have done. No, people need to be held accountable. Sometimes there's consequences for their actions, but you got to be careful because accountability and consequences are very different than vengeance. So check your motives. Sometimes the consequences is this, that forgiveness is not continuing in a relationship with somebody no matter what. Sometimes someone's going to hurt you enough that the best you can do is say, I am done. No more. Barriers have to be put up. And here's the other thing about forgiveness. It's not fair. Revenge is fair. Justice is fair. Getting even is fair. Having somebody pay you what they owe you, even with interest, that is fair. Forgiveness is not fair. Forgiveness means this: you are giving up the right to get even. You are giving up the right to get back what they owe you. You can do it. Now, it might take a while, but you can. There's a lot of help in this prayer to do that. But listen, the stakes are high. Unforgiveness, it's contagious. Once you start it, you're just going to continue to do it. And I've seen it time and time again, especially with parents. If you live a life where you do not forgive others, guess who learns it the most? Your kids. So when you pray the Lord's Prayer, and you have not done the hard work to forgive somebody else, let me rephrase it for you. Here's what you are literally praying. God, please don't forgive me. God, since I can't forgive my ex, or since I'm unwilling to forgive my neighbor or my coworker, that girl at school that lied about me, that kid that bullied me, God, you don't understand. Since I choose to not forgive them, I choose the economy of vengeance. So God, please don't forgive me. Forgive us our debts as we forgive the debts of others. I want to wrap it up this way. Something tangible. This is something practical that I learned a few years ago, or actually almost 10 years ago, from another pastor, Andy Stanley down in Atlanta. I was reading a book of his about the time I went through divorce, and many of you have probably been through divorce, and divorce is never good, right? I don't know anybody that's like, yay, divorce. It's brutal. And yes, there's sins on both sides, and I had a hard time coming to grips with how to accept all of this. Yes, I owned my own stuff because I know, although I'm as close to perfect as you can get, I'm still lacking. But I had a hard time with what I thought was owed to me. So I read this concept, and he said this. Take a piece of paper, and I did this in my apartment at the dining room table. And I wrote their names on it. And I said, you owe me my family back. You owe me holidays with everybody. You owe me an apology. You owe me everything that I've loved. At the bottom, I wrote this. You no longer owe me. I cancel your debt. And I signed it. And I shredded it. And that doesn't mean that from time to time I'm not reminded. But when I am, you know what also I'm reminded of? No, you don't owe me anymore. Maybe that's what you need to do today, to go home and think of those names. Listen, if you don't have one of these shredders, burn it. We love burning things, right? Eat it. Do whatever you need to do, but get rid of it. Give up your right to be paid back. So let's end the message this way. I'm going to pray this prayer out loud one more time, but when I get to the words of debts, or trespasses, I'm going to say debts. But when I get to the debts part, I'm going to pause. And the first time I pause, I want you to think and name those debts that you've created. Because I would bet in the midst of the last 20 minutes, something has popped in your mind. And then I'm going to continue on and say, as we forgive the debts of others, I'm going to pause again. And I want you to name those debts you need to forgive. Let's do it right now. Close your eyes. Lord, hear our prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread. And God, forgive us our debts. Lord, forgive us our debts as we forgive the debts of others. Lord, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.